The Mesa Chamber of Commerce Inside Business Podcast brings you a unique view of Mesa through its vibrant business community and the subjects that are important. The podcast is produced in the Mesa Chamber of Commerce Media Studio, sponsored by the University of Phoenix. Our podcast is hosted by Mesa Chamber of Commerce CEO Sally Harrison. Please enjoy this episode of the Mesa Chamber Inside Business Podcast.
Hi, it's Sally Harrison again from the Mesa Chamber, and we have Larry Young back from Boiling Frog Development. Larry is an author, professional speaker, and a business development strategist, and he is back. Welcome.
I know. Thanks for having me back. I must have done something right the last time, huh? You keep asking me back.
We will keep asking you back over and over.
You're awesome.
It's so good to see you. In our last episode, you talked about big picture thinking. Tell us a quick overview from that one.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway that we talked about last time is that when you think big and you have that big picture thinking, there's just very little competition in that space. Mm-hmm. And so it allows you to be able to kind of change your focus and realize that I have to become something different in order to achieve that. And I think that's where the growth in leadership and business come from.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, today, let's start with talk about the difference in businesses that thrive versus survive.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of that going on right now.
Yeah.
And how leadership views their success.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we talk a lot about, if you've ever heard me, well, I know you've heard me on stage and whatnot, and we talk a lot about fearless leadership. But there's a lot of books and a lot of speakers that kind of go down that path. And fearless leadership is not the idea of Superman, right? Or a fearless Viking that jumps before they look, right?
I kind of expect you to rip that shirt up and have a Superman
tattoo? Yeah.
Well, I wasn't going to go with tattoo necessarily. Maybe a shirt.
Fair enough.
A onesie.
Yeah. But what fearless leadership really is an organization or a leader's ability to take a calculated chance, but yet not put a lot of effort and a lot of weight on the failures. I think it was Jeff Bezos said this, I saw one time, that when they put an Amazon fulfillment center together, they expect that to go off without a hitch because they've done that 50, 60 times. But when they're trying a new initiative for like client delivery or client satisfaction, they're willing to do it with 60 to 70% of the information, fail, learn from it, move on. So for me, fearless leadership is more about fail fast, fail often. It's probably an easy way to put it.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Well, how does a leader demonstrate this?
Well, I think there's two pieces to that, Sally. I think one is as we alluded to, the big picture thinking. So it's kind of casting that vision and those types of things and being able to say, we're going to grow. So on the last podcast, we joked around about, go from 1,000 members. Well, what does a 5,000 member chamber look like? Right. Or what is if you're 300 million in revenue, what is $1 billion in revenue? And you realize you have to be different.
Sure.
But I think the second part of that is having a very realistic picture of where you are today. So there's a concept that I fell in love with years ago, and it's called the Stockdale Principle. And it was based on Admiral Stockdale, and this gentleman, he wasn't an admiral at the time, but he was a POW, Vietnam, kind of that story of 8 years of torture, that type of thing. Well, anyways, Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great, interviewed him. And he asked him at the end of the interview, he said, who were the people that didn't survive, that didn't make it through the horror, if you will. And he said it was the optimist.
The optimist didn't survive. Okay.
The optimist. And of course, that caught him like it catches our attention. And he said, because the optimist would think, well, we're going to get out at Christmas, and then Christmas would come and go, and they wouldn't. And then we're going to get out 4th of July, and then would come. And then when Christmas would roll around, these people would start to lose hope. He said, so the people that actually survived were the people that have that healthy balance, like there's going to be a better day, we're going to get through this, but they're grounded in the fact of what's really happening when things are going awry. And so like Admiral Stockdale and this idea, he understood that 8 years was going to be such a transformative piece of his life. And we think about, especially here at the Chamber, you did so much with businesses during the pandemic, right? When trying to provide value and do things for them, that's helping people in the reality of the situation, but giving hope for something better. And I love that idea around fearless leadership.
That's very cool. So as leaders, how do we get to have our teams feel fearless? That's hard to say.
Yeah.
Feel fearless.
Yeah. So there's a couple things we want when we really want to grow our organization. We grow our people. I think you've heard me say that 100 times. If you want to grow market share, grow people. And I think there's a couple things that I talk a lot about with organizations is to challenge yourself. So Sally, I'll ask you this question. When is the last time you did something for the first time?
A couple days ago.
Okay, so that's usually not the response, right?
Yeah.
And you a lot of times I'll say something meaningful for the first time, meaning that am I really in a position to try myself and actually push myself? And we even heard, a couple weeks ago at an event, about really pushing yourself farther and outside your comforts where you grow. I think that's a big part of it. But the other piece of that I was blessed with is that when I was taking over markets back when I was in the corporate world, I had a couple leaders that made me feel safe. They made me feel safe that, here's my skills, Larry, go do you. And when it didn't work out, I never got beat up for it, so to speak. I never got beat down or anything from that perspective. Yeah. And so I think that if we can challenge our future leaders to be able to try different things and not punish them and make them feel safe, amazing things can happen. In fact, I've told groups that concept alone is probably one of my greatest tools for my past success.
I think that's a great idea.
It is just allowing people to fail. I've done it, I've done it with my boys. Let them fail and just let them learn from it.
But it makes them stronger.
It does.
Yeah. I think kids need that, though, because they don't know how to cope with things. So everybody gets a trophy, right?
Yeah.
And it really isn't like that in life.
Yes.
So they need to learn how to make mistakes and that it's okay and then move on.
And that they don't define them. And so somebody, I get asked questions all the time. And somebody asked me one time, I said, I want to know the best leadership advice that you're giving your sons right now. I'd never been asked that before. And I think the idea was, what do I see as the most important? And I told him, I said, I'm trying to teach my sons not to put any weight on their failures. Understand them, learn from them, and then just move on. So.
Oh, that's good. Well, tell us the best leadership advice you give.
That I give? Oh gosh. Usually I get asked what leadership advice I get. What did I give? I think that if I gave you an answer that I thought, I think it would be selfish. So I'll tell you what, I'll answer you this way. I was in the corporate world for quite a while, and I managed a lot of people. And about every year or so, I get a letter from somebody that reported to me, and they'll talk about how I changed their life or something that I did that a lot of times we don't realize that we do as leaders.
That's cool.
And so I'll give you the most recent one because it was very touching. So this guy wrote me a letter, and he said talked about some of the things I did, and he said the thing that I value most about all of our time together is the fact that you always said that when you push for results, like if you push for promotions, you push for incentive, you push for success and things of that nature, that don't do it for the things that you get, do it because it allows you to have choices. So when you make more money, as an example, if you have those titles or that type of thing, you can start to create your own life and you have those choices. And the irony in that is I never thought that was a big deal. But I always talk to my people about do your work hard, kick butt, right, in here, so that you'll always have choices. You have choices to get promoted, you get choices for more incentive, and you don't have to take those, but or if you want to be in a position to have a job where you can stay home more with your kids, you can do that. So fast forward about 4 years ago when I left the corporate world, there I was. I had so many opportunities that I could do, and I had the ability to start boiling frog development because I had made choices in the past.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Any other stories like that?
No, usually I get asked the best leadership lessons, those types of things. I was thinking about this one when you asked. one of the cool things when I first started as a leader, and I didn't realize how big this was going to be. So I had just gotten into about 10 years in and got into executive leadership, and I was taking over a market. And I'll give you some perspective in the banking world. So usually, like commercial bankers will typically have 50 to $100 million portfolios, right?
Sure.
So this market that I'm taking over has 5 bankers, 3 support staff, and they have a total of 10 million in portfolio between all of them. So needless to say, we had some problems. So I step in, I'm about 3 weeks on the job as this market president, and I go upstairs to one of the support staff, and you can see she's fighting back, some crying. And most people, your listeners, have probably heard a story like this. And so I ask her, I'll just call her Joanne. Joanne, what's going on? Well, come to find out, one of our best customers verbally abuses her on probably a monthly basis. And that was backed up by the team, and people have heard this. And so I walked out, I said, well, I'll take care of it. She's like, no, it's not a big deal. She's trying to, well, of course, but she doesn't think it is. So this is the funny part. So I go downstairs and we'll call him Mr. Johnson. So I call Mr. Johnson, I get him on the phone. I said, hey, this is Larry Young. I'm the new market president. I need to come out and see you. I said, there's an issue with Joanne. And he's like, I don't have time to meet. I don't have time to do that type of stuff. And I said, well, it's 2:30 this afternoon, and at 4 o'clock, I'm going to start sending all your checks back and bouncing them if I don't have an appointment. I can't believe I'm telling this. Now I'm backing. I'm reeling in my mind. But anyways, so I got the appointment.
I bet you did.
And I went out, and there was no discussion on my part. I basically said, Mr. Johnson, this is what I've come to know and that type of stuff. And I said, you've got 30 days to find another bank and move your stuff. Otherwise, I'll start sending your checks back.
Oh, wow.
And if you call anybody at my bank and verbally abuse them during that 30 days, I'm going to start sending checks back. Are we clear?
Wow.
And I left. And I got back to the office. I pulled the team together. And I told him, I said, Mr. Johnson will no longer be a customer of our bank. And I remember Joanne was like, you shouldn't have done that, because that 10 million, Mr. Johnson represented 8 million of that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, the funny part is, you think that was hard. It was hard calling my boss the next day to let him know I fired 80% of my portfolio. yeah, that was fun. Yeah, no, actually, I talked about fearless earlier.
But what you gained from that with your team, holy cow.
Well, the thing that, it was one of the toughest things that I did, but when I look back on my career, it was like the dumbest, smartest thing I ever did. Dumbest by meaning I just did what I felt was right, and it turned out to be the smartest thing. Yeah. And they all were great employees. But the cool part is they all started to feel scared in that meeting, like, oh my gosh, I mean, where's our security now, right? The bank just went down 80%. And I told them, the second thing that I told them is I said, it won't always be like this. It will not always be like that. Customers will not treat us in that manner. Right. We don't deserve that. And I said, it won't always be like that. This lobby will be full of traffic. Every banker, every person will have customers and big portfolios. And it was really cool. About 10 years after that event, we were there.
Awesome.
I mean, we got there before there, but to look at it and that type of thing. But that was probably the best leadership
That's a great
moment.
story.
Yeah.
Well, that is leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. So before we wrap, tell us about your book.
Yeah, so the book "Walk the Sales Plank." It's kind of a funny story. I think I had a post one time, and I might have shared it with the Mesa Chamber, but it was a Monday morning. I always carry a little book with me, or a note. So if I'm waiting for an appointment for 50 minutes, I scratch out thoughts for the day or things to do. That way, I'm using my time efficiently. And I still got it. I'll send you the pictures sometime, but I wrote in this book, I'm like, need to write a book. And I wrote the title down and the date, and it was a Monday. So the post was, don't let Mondays suck, because you never know what's going to happen.
Nice.
And so I just decided that day, I'm like, I need to write a book. So I sat down and I pounded this thing out over about a month, and it was terrible. I had people that were better than I that made it look better. But the book is really designed for people to have a higher level of conversation with their clients. So a lot of times we can get very commoditized. You sell banking products, or you sell consulting, like for me, or you sell chamber memberships. And the whole idea is to teach people with actionable items that they can use so that they can go out and create more value for their clients, thus differentiating themselves by them.
It's a great book.
Yeah, I've loved it. I've got some really great reviews, and a lot of people
It's a great
we'll
book.
read it. Yeah. So thank you.
No, thank you. It is a great book. Anything else you want to mention?
No.
How can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so everything is, boilingfrogdevelopment.com is the website. Boiling Frog Development's the Facebook. Larry Young on LinkedIn, I play on that a lot because my clients play a lot on that type of thing. And then my email address is boilingfrogdevelopment@gmail.com.
You're very consistent.
I try to be.
I like that.
try to be. Well, that way people can kind of figure out how to reach me.
No, it's smart.
And what I usually like to do, Sally, is just sit down for an easy conversation and see whether things make sense and that
Great.
type of thing. So,
All right.
Yeah,
All right. You'll come back again.
I will come back again.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
This has been a Mesa Chamber of Commerce Inside Business podcast. You can find all podcast episodes at iTunes, Spotify, or your own favorite podcast website. You can also find them online at mesachamber.org. Content of this podcast is copyright the Mesa Chamber of Commerce, unless otherwise noted.